Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Battle Cry, the only show on Indian television where we get you up close with Indian warriors, Indian weapons and how this country protects itself. On this special episode of Battle Cry, we get you down into the trenches with one of India's biggest ever hunts for a future-ready combat vehicle, the next generation battle tank for the army.
Indian Army's big armour hunt begins. Quest for 2,000 new-gen battle tanks. Biggest ever tank-off begins rolling. But ghosts of tanks past still haunt. What will India's next tank look like? And will it be future-ready and dominant? The Great Indian Tank Hunt.
Battle tanks are unmistakable. They're called the bullies of the battlefield for a reason. The Indian Army has always fought with tanks. Each and every one of its wars have involved the use of tanks. The Indian Army has a large tank fleet, but most of it is upsettingly obsolete and in desperate need of replacement. In comes a 60,000 crore rupee project to replace many of those tanks with a cutting-edge, made in India, future-ready combat vehicle. Take a look.
Indian Army battle tanks. Deployed to deter the country's most pressing current national security threat. The big India-China standoff in eastern Ladakh. At least 2 tank regiments now stand deployed at these forbidding high altitudes. A reminder that no matter how modern battlefields become, armoured strength brought to the battle by tanks won't be replaced anytime soon. But India's battle tank fleet isn't exactly cutting edge. Populated almost entirely by a fleet of over 2,000 T-72 tanks and nearly 1,000 T-90 tanks. Both of Soviet origin and assembled in India over decades. Much of the fleet is in desperate need of replacement, with a battle tank that combines the Indian Army's new combat needs. The latest protective technologies, transformed mission requirements, and new generation intelligent capabilities. After over a decade of meandering in the realm of debate and discussion, the Indian Ministry of Defence has finally set the ball rolling, formally kicking off the Future Ready Combat Vehicle Program, a massive project to choose, develop and build nearly 2,000 main battle tanks, a total cost of 60,000 crore rupees. The FRCV will quite simply be the Indian Army's biggest ever hunt for armoured strength. Broadly, The FRCV will be a 58-ton tank sporting active armor protection and cutting-edge survival capabilities against drones and missiles. The FRCV will likely be a private sector-led contest, with industry giants like L&T, Tata, Kalyani Group and Mahindra competing for the prize. Clearance to the FRCV comes in the wake of India's mixed track record in the development of tanks. The Indian Army is currently testing the Zorawar light tank. Developed at record speed and cost by L&T and the state-run Defence Research and Development Organisation in response to emergent requirements from the standoff situation in eastern Ladakh. Once tested, the Zorawar will be ordered and inducted in hundreds for mountain tank regiments. But the Zorawar is the happier side of India's tryst with developing its own tanks. The more depressing side of this journey has been that of the Arjun, a main battle tank that began development in the 80s. Rolled through a notoriously troubled path that was riddled with blame games, shifting goalposts and failures to deliver. Resulting in the Indian Army agreeing to induct a measly 242 tanks. A tiny fraction of the numbers that would have been needed to justify the gargantuan time and energy spent in readying the Arjun. With the new FRCV, the Indian Army modernization effort hopes to draw a line in the sand. Absorb all the many bitter lessons of Project Arjun and move forward with a fresh ethic. The expectations on the FRCV will be huge, given India's experience with tanks and the fact that India's land battle requirements have not lessened even a little. The question now is, can the FRCV be everything the Army hopes it will be?
And who better to talk about the future-ready combat vehicle program than two former tankmen, two veterans of the Indian Army's Armoured Corps who know more than a thing or two about what it means to plan a tank, what it means to operate a tank, and everything in between. Joining us on this very special episode of Battle Cry is Colonel Ajay Shukla. He's a commentator, former Indian Army Tank Corps officer, former commander of an armoured regiment as well, and someone who's written extensively about India's armoured programs. Also is Lieutenant General Ashok Shivane. He's a former Directorate General of the Mechanized Forces, and very, very importantly, it was under his tenure that the FRCV program was actually conceptualized. He's also been an advisor to the government post his retirement on the subject of combat vehicles. So the two gentlemen we have here, they go beyond just being stakeholders in the success of a program of this kind. Colonel Ajay Shukla and General Shivane, thank you very much for your time here on Battle Cry. General Shivane, first to you, the FRCV program concepted, initially detailed under your tenure as Director General of the Mechanized Forces. Your opening thoughts, on the program finally being, at least the initial part of it being kick-started now by the Ministry of Defence.
Thank you, Shiv, for this invite. At the very outset, I would say that the FRCV, or the Future Ready Combat Vehicle, must be viewed in terms of a long-term fleet management and future perspective of the Armored Corps and the tanks as such. What I mean to say is, you have two tasks when you have equipment-intensive organization. One is to enhance present capabilities so that they remain contemporary. And second is to evolve and bring about new capabilities for the future.
Yes.
And this has to be a continuum. So what I coined was, so though you have to sustain, you have to sustain the first capability, you have to upgrade the present fleet, you have to develop the next capability, you have to replace once the development takes place, and O is for you have to optimize the indigenous capability. And it is in this context that the FRCV, which is meant to replace the obsolete T-72,
Yes.
which came up in 1979 and the last made in 2009 as such, the last version of it, they need to be replaced. And the replacement of these has to be by FRCV.
Right.
Second point I just want to highlight quickly is the demystifying why is it called FRCV and why not the future main battle tank, FMBT. Look, FR, future FRCV, which is there, is future ready, which is technologies of the future.
Yes.
And combat vehicle, because it is a platform of family of platforms which is going to evolve. There's going to be a Bijla tank, there's going to be a recovery vehicle, there's going to be other vehicles. So it is being seen as a holistic development.
Right. Very, very interesting. Colonel Shukla, your opening thoughts on the FRCV. You've written extensively about it over, over a decade now. The final shape that's been given to it, at least in this initial phase where the Defense Ministry has sort of set the ball rolling on this 60,000 crore rupee program that envisages 1,700 tanks being bought in phases. Your opening assessment of this, Colonel Shukla.
Shiv, thanks for having me on the show. I have to just place a little bit of context to the FRCV. It is not just any normal weapon system. It's not the artillery. It's not the infantry. The armored corps, and in particular, the 3 armored strike corps, and about 8 to 9 integrated battle groups that are formed at the start of the war. Their job is to smash into Pakistan or to China, go through their forward defenses, get into their depth area, and essentially throw their military into a state of turmoil, into a sort of mental disbalancement about where these armored corps forces have come from and what they're going to do to sort of counter them now that they are in the rear areas already. So it's extremely important to have the sort of armored corps in place, to have the tanks ready to break into enemy territory, where there is no workshops and sort of logistic installations of yours. That makes the tank a very self-contained vehicle, and the tank crews are all self-contained. Same is true of the at the larger level, the armored brigades and armored divisions. So it's very, very important to understand the need for the complete battle readiness of these formations, and that's the context that I wanted to set.
Very important context that you've raised. General Shivani, the India's attempts at building its own tank has been a bit of a mixed bag. We've seen the Arjun tank program, which has had many, many ups and downs, more downs really, if you look at the way it finally ended up. Would you have concerns going forward for the FRCV? Do you think all the stakeholders would have learnt many painful lessons from past attempts, and hopefully those mistakes will not happen going forward?
I think certainly, because I, having seen the private industry come of age, you've seen the light tank, which again conceived during my tenure, manifesting and today undergoing field trials as such. Otherwise, too, I think the capability of a major platform like the battle tank today exists in the private industry. So I'm pretty sure that it's time that we would have learned our lessons of the past and we would move ahead. And I think in a matter of, say, another 6 to 8 years, we would likely to see the manifestation of this capability with an essentially indigenous character,
Colonel Shukla, the public-private partnership model has presented itself successfully, in a handful of new projects, including the recent light tank project, which Larsen and Toubro and the DRDO actually turned around in pretty impressive time in response to a requirement, considering what's happening in eastern Ladakh. Do you think the FRCV, of course, is going to be a more complicated program, but do you think that the fact that the private sector has emerged, with a greater capability, it has demonstrated that it's able to build complicated weapon platforms like tanks and armored vehicles, etc., holds the FRCV in good stead? It provides some optimism?
Good point, Shiv. I think that there has been in the past a sort of a lack of coordination between the DRDO, which designs and sort of essentially puts the technicals into the tank. And on the other hand, the Ordnance Factory Board, which at a tank factory near Chennai makes these tanks, manufactures them, and gives them for operation to the military. So far, there has been a slight lack of coordination between the DRDO and the Ordnance Factory Board factory at Avadi, and that has resulted in delays. That has resulted in a certain amount of sort of confrontation and bad blood between the sort of the people who manufacture the tank and the armored corps that actually operates it. I would like to believe that is in the past now. And that the DRDO, which when it produces the FRCV, has the confidence and the readiness to give it for manufacture immediately and induct it in large numbers. If you're going to induct just about one regiment a year or so, something like that, as has been the case in the past, you are going to sort of run short of armor, and your sort of essential operational tasks might go unmet. So it's important to have this coordination going between all these three elements:
yes,
the designer, the manufacturer, and the operator, and to make sure that sort of this goes through smoothly.
General Shivane, self-reliance and Atmanirbharta are, phrases that we hear a lot, while reporting on defense programs. It doesn't always turn out the way it's supposed to. The recent examples have been, delays in the supply of engines for the Tejas fighter, sort of holding back deliveries. We've seen that happen with the upgraded Arjun tank also, being held up because the German engines, there are problems with the delivery of those engines as well. Is it imperative and important for the FRCV to be as, minimally reliant on foreign equipment and technology as possible? It is going to be an Indian program largely, but even at the subsystem engine level?
Yes, Shiv, I agree that Atmanirbharta, in its true context from policy to outcomes, has got its own challenges as such. But coming to the FRCV, firstly, let me clarify that it would be open to the defense industry also, because you're going to finally select two development agencies who will field it, and you carry out your trials and then you place manufacturing orders. Now, if you look at the major systems of the tank today, you see the engine of the T90, which has been indigenized within the country. You see the gun tube, which has been indigenized. you see the explosive reactive armor in terms of survivability, which is superior to ones which are given to us by the Russians on our T-90.
Right.
You have seen your navigation system, you've seen your situational awareness systems. So I think we've come a long way, but I tend to agree with Ajay Shukla that the challenge lies in working in a collaborative, hand-holding mode from a womb to a tomb concept and not in cocoons, which has been a failing of the past. But I do feel the FRCB is capable of having an indigenous character, which is extremely important from the lessons we are learning from the Ukraine-Russian war.
Yeah.
If you don't have your equipment and you are not fighting the battle with your equipment, you will be looking beyond, on your back for others to supply and they may not come. So it's very important that it has an indigenous character with all the tools of major supply space within our capability.
Very interesting. And one final question that I'll put to Colonel Shukla is this. You know, Ajay, General Shivani mentioned the Ukraine war. We've seen the standoff in Ladakh as well. You know, when you look at debates going on about tank warfare, there's always one narrative saying, you know, tanks are a weapon of the past. We shouldn't be investing in them. On the other hand, you know, these conflicts have shown that tanks are very much part of the fight. You know, they're very much part of, you know, the order of battle, no matter what conflict we're actually looking at. Where do you stand on that? Because the FRCV is going to be a program that provides these military assets for the next half century for the Indian Army.
Shiv, the death of the tank, as it were, has been foretold many times.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're still around. The tanks are still around. It's still the bully of the battlefield.
Yeah.
It's still a sort of a weapon system that everybody concentrates on, because if the tanks are through your defenses and in your rear, your war is essentially over. So it's extremely important to treat the planning and the manufacture and design of tanks without this thing hanging over that, you know, in Ukraine, they had a very difficult time, the Russian tanks, and therefore it means the same will happen with India. No. The reason why a lot of the debacles that beset the Russian forces in Ukraine are because they failed to do essential sort of tasks, such as provide the tank elements with sort of protective infantry sort of cover, and so on and so forth. I could give a list of errors that the Russians made. And it is very surprising because the Russians are actually regarded as amongst the theoretical gurus of tank warfare. But they seem to have made a mistake in sort of letting their tanks go into Ukraine without adequate cover and protection, and they've paid a heavy price for that. But I'm pretty sure our generals are looking into this, are drawing the correct lessons from this, and it will not be the same when sort of India takes on whoever its next adversary is.
Interesting. We have just a couple of seconds left. General Shivani, I saw you raising your hand. You wanted to just add to that point? Last point, yes.
Shiv, the opportunity of the tank has not been signed. If you see whether it be Ukraine, whether it be Israel against the Hamas, take out the tank from that battle, what would be the outcome? You would see they would have not gone that far.
Absolutely.
So, in keeping with our operation environment, the turbulent borders and the disputed borders we have, boots on grounds and tracks on ground and tracks lead are essential for any sort of a combat superiority that the nation wants to generate. And FRCV is one which will make this difference, whether it be on a Western front or whether it be on a Northern front.
A first prototype rolling out in about 6 to 7 years is what the current timeline is looking at. It looks optimistic at this time, and we're glad to hear that the death of the tank is a highly exaggerated thing. We look forward to the FRCB program, and we'll be reporting on it at every step. Thanks for that very illuminating conversation, General Shivani and Colonel Shukla. Thank you so much for your time here.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's a wrap on this edition of Battle Cry. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, as we always say here on the show, India's national security will only truly be realized when no human needs to be sent into battle and no weapon fired.